and digging into it, I mean, there's some really great sites out there that kind of explain everything and try to do their best to explain the whole story. And there's a huge narrative there. Have you ever thought about turning that into a movie?
Yeah, I mean, we get asked that every once in a while.
I just think that would be so fascinating to be able to
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that there's
First of all, great interviewer. I mean, if you watch the whole interview, you'll understand what I'm talking about. This interviewer is actually fantastic. Besides the fact they asked this question, this is one of the best interviews they've done in a really long time. Also, great interviewer for asking this question, because we're all kind of wondering this. You know, Tyler starts by giving kind of a joke answer here, like, oh, it's you and my, it's just you and my mom, or my mother-in-law, sorry, just you and my mother-in-law are asking me about this. But then the interviewer follows up, and I think they'll be really compelling. I think it'll be interesting. And he agrees. I don't know that we've seen, I certainly in any of the interviews I've watched, haven't seen such a direct acknowledgement of the fact that something like this would be really, really cool to do. Not just that it'll be like, oh, it would be cool to make a movie one day, but that it would be actually really compelling to translate it into that format.
I mean, just something to storytelling that transcends different art forms and can live in different mediums. And I think that we've always thought that like putting something behind the music, and if people, wanted to dive in and try to understand something else that was going on, they can, I guess, I hope that the fans can tell that there was just a lot of time put into it that isn't necessarily like front facing. There's a lot of research and a lot of world building. And
so now I sort of diving into just talking about the lore and the creation of that as a whole, but just in terms of like an actual movie, I think it's encouraging to see that it's something that they could potentially be interested in. I'm personally myself on the fence about whether or not that's something I would want to see. It could be done well. It could also, there is a risk that perhaps it will be done in a somewhat cringe fashion if it's not done quite right. Like something could read a little odd about doing that. Not necessarily, but there is a risk of that. But I think theoretically on paper, a DEMA movie would be really cool. And it wouldn't have to be anything complicated. I'm not talking about some fantastic epic. I'm talking about taking what already exists in terms of a story that they've already built out and just bringing it to the screen in terms of bringing in things that we only saw in the letters, bringing in things that we only saw referenced in I Am Clancy, bringing in the moment where he was in the tower writing Skill and Icy, right? Things that we don't see in the music videos because there wasn't time to show them in the music videos, and bring them to life in that context. And then keeping what we already saw in the music videos, keeping that narrative as well. So you wouldn't actually have to like create a ton of new stuff, but going beyond just stitching together the music videos and releasing that, which in and of itself I think would be really cool to do, as I keep mentioning. But actually bringing the whole story to life on the big screen and making it some sort of like musical film. I don't know. I think it could be cool to do something that's just purely narrative based without any of their music, but it could also be cool to do like a 21 Pilots musical where they still have the kind of breaks into these different songs that they have in the music videos, but then there's a lot more filling out the gaps in between the music videos as well.
So was the narrative in place from the beginning, or is it something that you started with and it evolved through time and ended up?
I mean, this is a question we've all been asking for a long time.
It was in place from the beginning, but admittedly, we didn't know if, like when we put out Blurryface, that story was there, but it was probably able to be ended sooner than it was. Like some shows end after like 1 or 2 seasons, and then I think that the idea was, I don't know if people are going to really care about this for this many albums. And so what happened was we realized like we got renewed for another season. Let's keep going.
So this is interesting as well, and it's something I've kind of suspected or half suspected for a while, that Blurryface was built out as a concept album in a way with the story behind it and all of this that was underlying it, but wasn't necessarily completely surface level the way that we got with Trench. But it was very much constructed in a way where, unlike Trench, you could have ended and moved away from the story after Blurryface if people weren't interested in it. Whereas with Trench, the issue that some people had, including myself with Skeleton Icy, is that it seemed like the story had ended and they were moving past it, and that was disappointing for people in a way that I don't think it would have been for Blurryface, or for fans of Blurryface. I kind of discovered them with Blurryface, listened to that album a lot. I thought it was a cool concept. It kind of had this like album-specific story behind it, this character of Blurryface. But when Trench was being teased and coming out, I didn't initially understand there was even a connection between the two albums, or that Blurryface was a character that was continuing. And so if Trench had come out and not really had any connection or relation to Blurryface or anything like that, I don't think I would have been disappointed in that, or in the fact that they weren't continuing the story. It's just interesting to see that they didn't see Blurryface as chapter 1 of the story, so much as a kind of pilot episode of a show. And so people could have listened to Blurryface and moved on. A more apt comparison might be Blurryface is sort of the Hobbit of this story, right? The book The Hobbit you can have as a standalone thing and not need Lord of the Rings to be created. And that book in and of itself is fine. You don't need the context of Lord of the Rings to appreciate The Hobbit. And so if that was all that was ever created, The Hobbit in and of itself would still be a good book that wouldn't feel incomplete. And I think in some ways that's kind of what Blurryface is like in relation to the Trench Saga, where Blurryface was created. It kind of introduces a world, sort of, not so much a world, but like a theme, a concept, this idea of a character and a sort of battle with this character. But it doesn't really go much beyond that. But then it allows for something like Trench and the Trench Saga to be then created and exist within the world that Blurryface allowed for. This segment is, I think, this is the longest and most interesting segment of this interview. Really the main reason why I wanted to pull up and talk about this interview.
Let's talk about Drag Path. Just got that released to the masses this week. Super excited about that. Amazing song.
Thank you.
And the video, I'm curious about the video because you guys chose to borrow some art from another video. Can you talk about that and what led you to that?
Yeah, so about 15 years ago, it was actually on Vimeo. Do you remember that website?
Yeah.
So, I mean, obviously we've discovered the video on YouTube as well, but it seems like at this point it was just on Vimeo as well. But it does confirm right off the bat that Tyler Joseph found this video 15 years ago. That's something he's had in mind for a while.
This was a while ago, but yeah, stumbled on this this film called Out of a Forest and fell in love with it and found out it was kind of unofficially released as more of a, I think it was more like a university school project. But I've talked to Tobias. I reached out to him who created it and just basically said like, man, I've loved your film for a long time. I've never thought that it got like as much credit and eyeballs as it should have. And there's some uncanny resemblance between what the song is talking about and what your film, some of the themes that are in there. And oh man, it's probably one of my favorite videos that we've ever done.
That in and of itself, that sentence right there is crazy. This is one of his favorite videos that he's ever put together. And so that combined with the fact that he said he found this 15 years ago and he thinks it's super underrated and so on. But then also just that it's something he found 15 years ago. That he has known about this video for a long time. It's not something they recently discovered and were like, oh, this fits. This is actually something he's known about. I think is really interesting. And it sort of implies or half confirms they might have had this in mind or at the very least been influenced by it as they created the story. So let's keep watching.
Because when I first saw it, I was like, I don't think this existed yet.
Him watching the film predates the existence of the lore. Let that sink in.
And what a way to bookend the journey that we've been on so far is to be able to, commission this film and pay those artists and everyone who worked on it to then put it on this song Drag Path, which is this unreleased, unofficial song with an unofficial video, and put them together and give them both their like moment.
It really seems to me like he's sort of saying without saying. The fact that he wanted this video to bookend the story is because it does actually play some kind of influence or had some kind of inspiration on the story. I'm not in any way trying to say that he copied the story for the Trench narrative from the video. I mean, I don't think there's really even much implication that would be the case. What we see in the video doesn't directly play out in the Trench story or anything like that. Some of the themes, some of the concepts, some of the imagery, I think certainly played a role in inspiring certain things that Tyler later created. And I think he's kind of acknowledging without acknowledging fully that here.
Fondly remember seeing it for the first time and wanting to create something powerful. And
so in a way, the original art, the original video has inspired you to want to create something that
100%. It's to the point where, I showed my dad the video a few days ago, and he's like, I think you showed this to me like a decade ago. I was like, yeah, I probably did. I was like showing my family, like, look how awesome this video is and how it captures like such a cool emotion. And, how the moon the whole time is the top of that hat, where you feel like they're just cutting to it to kind of add, setting the scene or establishing your characters in the world. But it's actually referencing like the thing that's going to eventually save this little rabbit.
I think this is one of the most important parts of this interview. this reference to the moon. This may be one of the things, obviously we have lines like death inspires me like a dog inspires a rabbit. We have certain other references that we see throughout the lore. This concept of the moon and the importance of the moon is something that I've been trying to put my finger on for a while, especially as we got into the final chapter of the lore. And we see this imagery, especially starting with the contract. I mentioned this when the Dragpath music video came out. That was one of the things that struck me about that music video, this short film, was that imagery is very, very similar to the imagery that we see in the contract. That imagery of that big white moon-like object in the contract, and then in the flashbacks to Jumpsuit in City Walls, and then in the live stream version of Heathens and Trees. Why did imagery like that keep appearing throughout the story? And then we get the Dragpath music video with that there. And then in this interview, he talks about how that was something that stuck out to him and was a kind of a major point of curiosity and inspiration from that video, something he thought that was done very well in that video. It makes me want to go back and kind of just study through everything with that context in mind. To look back at the music videos that we got, especially the lore-related ones, with that context in mind. To look back at the letters, with this context, or this idea of the importance of the moon, coupled with this other thing that he said, where the moon was something, and here this could be something that extends into the lore, not necessarily as the moon, but as something else in the lore. That there's this idea of something that's kind of there, that they keep cutting to, and it seems like they're just cutting to it to show it. But really, that's the thing that's going to save him in the end. And out of a forest, it was the moon. They keep cutting to the moon to kind of create the setting, but the moon is what saves him in the end. So is there something like that we've been shown, that we've been given subtly throughout the lore, throughout the imagery, that we haven't taken note of? Because it just seems like it's there as sort of general setting, a sort of imagery context, visual context for the story. But really, that is what's going to save him. Because, again, we didn't see what saves him at the end, because he hasn't been saved. He's going through the cycle again, but then Dragpath implies this other ending where he does get saved at the end and he does make it out. So is that answer hidden among the story that we've been given already? Is that evidence there for us to find, as he seems to be implying in the song, in the lyrics of Dragpath, that we just need to go back and actually find it with the context of what he says here in mind? That's something I'm going to be kind of thinking about and looking through. Again, I don't know if it's necessarily the moon itself, right? I don't know if it's a one-to-one comparison. I suspect there's something else that we've just completely overlooked because it's hidden in plain sight. But then once we find it, it will explain a lot.
I just think it's one of my favorite themed pieces that I've ever seen. And it really was a dream come true when it came together and we were able to kind of like mesh our worlds and our art to two unofficial things coming together officially.
And they really do work extremely well
Yeah.
together. Like the song's beautiful, the video is beautiful, and them together is just it almost creates magic.
Go watch the full interview, genuinely. If you thought any part of what I just showed you was interesting, the rest of the interview is, I think, equally as interesting.